All right, you guys, welcome back to Freedom Papers. This is Morgan Zegers, your favorite little history nerd host. But I'm not alone today. We don't have Connor Clegg as a guest. Instead, we have a very unique guest, somebody that I've always wanted to talk to, because you guys know me. I'm all about homemaking. I'm all about homeschool. I know there's a difference between a man and a woman, and I think the entire concept of the family is forgotten in our country, but so important if we want to continue this republic. So, that being said, we have the bookers at Turning Point USA, the producers behind the scenes, have gotten in contact with Scott Yenor, the professor from Boise State University that is so outspoken on these issues. And we're going to talk about some current events. We're going to talk about the family. We're going to talk about unique roles in society and their relation to the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. So, Professor, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So, I should say this. I knew about you because I'm pretty in tune, especially with the family and feminism issues going on in the day. And I have a feeling a lot of the more younger students that listen to this, they probably haven't become aware of your situation. And so everybody knows out there, there was an article. If you look up Scott Yenor, one of my favorite articles that first pops up is called Boise State Has a Scott Yenor Problem, and it could prove costly. So can you explain why you're in this pickle and why the media, especially in your local area, is so against you in this way? What happened?
Well, this is my second cancellation episode here at Boise State. About 4 years ago, I wrote an article about the ways in which transgender rights will threaten parental rights. And there was a certain kind of movement against me here on campus at that point, and it kind of blew over after a bit. Then last October, I gave a speech at the National Conservatism Conference in Orlando, and my job there was to give a talk on how feminism and threatens the family and what kind of families we'd want to have if we're going to have a strong country. And I gave a speech there, and maybe about a month after that, there was kind of a local blow up, one of these cancellation episodes again, and kind of slanderous things said about what I didn't say there and what I did say, and then certain movements on campus that are just now resolving themselves, perhaps, and maybe I'll be able to talk about it at a future date. But the reasoning behind this is that you can't really have a strong nation without strong families, and it's difficult to have strong families without men who are able to lead families and women who would like to be mothers and wives. And so much of our education system kind of points men away from responsibility and women away from any kind of domesticity. Domesticity doesn't need to be the only thing in anyone's life, just like a man doesn't only have to be a provider. But without men and women prioritizing family life, it's kind of difficult to imagine the country recovering a decent kind of family life. So I wrote a book about a year and a half ago entitled The Recovery of Family Life, and it went through various ways in which feminism and contemporary liberalism and sexual liberation theology threatened the integrity of the family, and various ways in which the public policy of the country could fight against it. And so that has put me in hot water in an institution that's very much dedicated to the particular understanding of feminist rights.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, the college campuses, they're just looking for ways to attack us at this point. I call them little mini totalitarians, all the students on college campuses these days. So I like to remind people this isn't just cancel culture. This is totalitarianism, where they must eliminate and shout down and remove from positions of power and from the public square anybody who dares to go against them and commit wrongthink. Professor, can we go back? I mean, I thought that was interesting. Crazy timing for you to mention that first attempt at canceling you with transgender rights and parent rights. Can you make some comparisons about how that has come true 4 years ago then and now today, what we're seeing with this idea that our children are community and government owned and not able to be raised up by their own parents these days?
Yeah, well, I think there are three things that you have to think about when you think about the relationship between the state and families. The first thing is that states can do positive harm to families by taking over their functions or their decision making. And this was what I wrote about a few years ago when I said that there were many instances in other countries. Canada was the one that this was happening in most of all, where the public authorities were taking kids away from biological parents, those who had custody over the kids, and then foisting kind of sex change, gender reassignment stuff onto the kids without parental consent. And that really showed that parental rights and government power, in order to impose this agenda, were coming into conflict with one another. There's also the second issue is, should parents have the ability to perform gender reassignment things on their own children? Because the parental rights idea is that parents are free. Or is there a limit on parental rights that would mean things like gender reassignment could be abuse of children? So then the state might step in and stop parents from doing such things. So, and then the third level of this is just utter family autonomy, where no matter what parents do, they should be able to kind of get away with it. And it seems to me that we're dealing with all three of these things right now when it comes to the transgender issue, because there are instances around the country where public authorities are doing this without parental consent. There are instances of parents doing this, but it being considered child abuse, like the Texas law that just happened. And then there are instances where we just completely defer to parental rights. The point I would make, I think what I've learned in the 4 years since my first cancellation, is that you can frame this stuff in parental rights terms, but parental rights isn't enough. Like, you also need to be able to evaluate to some extent how parents are using their freedom to raise their kids, and because there are reasonable limits placed on it. And so I think right now the hot part of the contemporary debate is whether or not transgender surgeries and chemical castration and those things constitute child abuse, so that parents wouldn't have a right to do them.
It's fascinating that you bring that up, because I was just with some friends this weekend and we were talking about that of, if we don't believe in government intervention, and we are very much in favor of individuals and families and communities, especially not federal government, then what do we do about the fact that I personally believe a lot of this transgender stuff, these hormone therapy stories, the actual surgery stories for children under 18 before they're able to make solid decisions for themselves. I mean, you used to not be able to get a tattoo. I don't think you can still get a tattoo even, but under 18 years old, because you're going to regret it one day. What do we do about the fact that I think that's child abuse? Are we supposed to just hope that we can sway the culture in a way that parents don't do this anymore? Or should there be limits put by the government on parents to stop them from doing so? Do you see where there's that predicament for us as conservatives here?
Yeah, and that's why I say that parental rights isn't a sufficient framework. It's a necessary framework, but it's not a sufficient framework for thinking this through. Because we need to be able to distinguish between an abusive use of parental rights and discretion, and like a legitimate range of parental discretion. No one thinks that parents just have a right, carte blanche, to physically abuse their children, so that to beat them within an inch of their lives. It makes sense that under those circumstances there are limits placed in law on parental authority. And the legitimate question is, how far-ranging does that legitimate limit on parental discretion reach? And does it reach the idea of transgender surgeries or whatever? I think that's where the next phase of the transgender debate will be from the right.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Thank you for the direction on that, because I could tell you a lot of younger conservatives my age, I'm 25, and as we're focusing more on family and as we're starting to look more into that, we're really perplexed by a lot of the challenges that we're going to face, especially as we see so many young people our age say that they're going to support this for their future children. I mean, it's disturbing to me. Speaking of raising up children, so let's get a little Freedom Papers oriented. We'll talk about the Fed Papers for a little bit. A common theme on this is, have you read the Charles Kessler version of the Federalist Papers? He does a great introduction.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
my favorite one, and it's just it's like my favorite chapter, the introduction to Charles Kessler's copy of the Federalist Papers. And he says that in order to maintain this situation that we have, the Republic, we need an enlightened public. The only way we can get the population of America to rationally and enduringly consent to the principles of the Constitution is if they remain enlightened. That's the only way. And I think one of the biggest and most simple ways to look at the problems we face today is by saying, okay, we are no longer enlightened. And it explains so much. So one of those solutions, when we talk about solutions oriented and problem solving this, it's about raising up good, strong citizens. Now, this is where I'm really excited to ask you about some of these things. I'm always shocked by how far we've strayed from the basic scientific facts. And I think it's very, it's safe to say that the left is very anti-science. I would say people like us are more pro-science than anybody on the left these days because we understand that there's basic biological differences between a man and a woman, a boy and a girl. And when we're raising up strong citizens, women have a unique role in the keeping of the Republic, and men have a unique role in the keeping of the Republic. And the more I look at it, I'm like, wow, we are really screwing up by raising little boys and little girls as if there's no differences between the two and that they won't have different passions, different emotions on the inside. A good example, I hate to be so descriptive, but when I hear breakup stories between my friends, they're shocked that the man just doesn't care and they're heartbroken. Or a hookup story where they can't believe the guy just doesn't want to talk to him the next day and the woman is heartbroken. I mean, when you look at the release of certain hormones, when that kind of stuff happens, it is anti-science. It is anti-human, and it's really, really sad to see the destruction of some of the most basic tenets of the human race. So can you talk a little bit about that, of where did we go wrong? Because I think it starts with the basic raising of boys and girls to not tell them that there's a special role for them in the keeping of the society.
Yeah, I mean, I think one place to think about this in the Federalist Papers is in Federalists 55, 56, I can't remember which one exactly, but Madison talks about both enlightenment and vigilance being necessary to keep a republic in good shape. And so it's one thing to be enlightened, that is to know what's going on, but it's another thing to be spirited.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
And jealous of the liberties that might be taken from you. And you can take this jealousy too far. And during the founding, there was a tendency to perhaps to take these jealousies too far. There was a worry about ever having a standing army. And Hamilton in Federalist 1 talks about an excessive jealousy being hostile to the idea that there needs to be power lodged somewhere in a country. So you can have too much jealousy or too much vigilance, but you can also have not enough vigilance. And what that means is that there's no one there who is worried about the long-term effects of laws on the character of the nation. And I think built into that or sewn into that worry is the worry that men will not be vigilant about protecting their liberties, and that they need to be raised in order to recognize the long-term effects of and threats to the law that the laws pose to the future of liberty. And so there was always like a very deep concern about maintaining that vigilance. And vigilance is a reflection of character. And it's generally, and I think this is kind of sewn into the Federalist Papers anthropology, it's really thought to be the job of men to be those vigilant stewards of the country's future. And no one talks about vigilance anymore. No one thinks of it as really one of the chief virtues necessary for a free people. And it's one thing to talk about enlightenment, and everyone can kind of get behind it, but it's another thing to talk about vigilance. And I think it's even a manly vigilance that Madison talks about, Federalist 55 or 56. And so I think that as the country has tended toward an androgynous way of raising men and women together and pointing them toward the same way of life and the same kind of character, the thing that you'd expect to happen, according to the Federalist Papers, is what has happened. That is a decline in manly vigilance. and therefore, the republic is kind of in peril from once again, from Madison's point of view, but I'm sure Hamilton would agree on this. And it really comes from foisting a different kind of vision of what the character of men and women are going to be, or it comes from ignoring the problem of character altogether.
Wow, that is spot on. Thank you for, it's almost like there was a hole that was there that I was trying to figure out with this concept of the Enlightenment issue. Vigilance is very important. And you're right, it is a manly thing. I'm very much into talking about there's a difference, and everybody contributes different things. And I don't know, have you ever been to Colorado School of Mines? Have you ever done anything with those guys?
No, but sounds great.
So I spoke at the campus. I don't like to do a lot of speeches. This is the thing. I'm kind of a radical. And so I'd rather be on a homestead tending to my garden, not going and getting yelled at by college students on a college campus, So I only go every once in a while. I agree to go to Colorado School of Mines for Turning Point, and I get there and there's 40 students there protesting me for being a transphobe and a, quote, misogynist, because I have internalized misogyny. What they usually say about conservative women is that we're problematic. That's the term that they like to use. So I get there and I'm like, wait, they're here for me? I'm here to talk about history. I don't know. I'm here to talk about freedom papers. So I get there and they're all protesting, and it was so shocking to me because the people protesting me, it turns out it was the Women's Club of Engineers, because it's a very male-focused campus. And then it was these female engineer club people that were there to say that I was a misogynist against them, when in reality, my whole focus is making sure that women understand that we're so unique and so important in our own ways in society. It's just not the same contributions as men. What do you say about this? It's this ferociousness that you see on college campuses and with probably Gen Z and millennials, where we've been raised up to accept nothing less than putting women on top, on this pedestal, where I feel very bad for boys and men who see I might actually not get selected for positions, not because I wasn't experienced enough, but because I didn't reach a quota. And we're seeing that even with the Supreme Court. I mean, the highest positions of power in this country are now being chosen based on physical features and gender. What do you have to say about that? And what does that do for the men in the country when they're put down in that way?
Well, the principle of the country is equality, and it has been from the beginning, and it's always been difficult with that principle to deal with difference. We've had a difference on race. And we definitely have very persistent difference on sex. And men and women bring different things to the table. They have different virtues and vices, different choices in an atmosphere of freedom. And, for the longest time in the country, we dealt with that difference by, kind of an idea of the family being a community represented by men. And that principle is overturned over the course of the first 150 years of our history, when we culminating, but there are other things that belong to this, culminating in women receiving the vote, which is something that Americans are very proud of, and is certainly very consistent with the opinions that we have now. And what that means is equal citizenship for men and women, and reconciling the differences between men and women in a situation where we have the common idea, widely accepted idea of equal citizenship is no easy task. It's almost as if there can't be a principle of equality governing the relations between the sexes, that there needs to be like some idea in the public laws about how things should be structured. And since the feminist movement, I think, that is since the late 60s, we have judged the health of the country based on the happiness and health of women. And that has led to the detriment, I think, of men. Their life expectancies have gone down compared to women over the course of the last 30 years. It's difficult to get public laws to pay attention to the fate of men. 60% of college students are females. No one considers that to be a problem. It's a problem when various disciplines have an overrepresentation, so-called, of men and an underrepresentation, so-called, of women. but the opposite is never considered to be a problem. So I think this is what has gotten me in trouble here. But I think it's going to be difficult to really defend family life on the basis of those assumptions, and that we have to really expect and maybe even celebrate the idea that men and women are going to make different choices, and that means different choices in family life and different choices in career, and provide social honor for both men and women as they make different choices from one another. I think that's really the only path forward when it comes to recovering family life.
Yeah, and this is where I always get stuck and I get frustrated because at least for my generation, like I said, I'm 25, so I'm like the first year of Gen Z, or I'm the last year of millennials. It depends, whatever article you're reading. But you're just kind of raised up and you're taught, well, you got to go to college and then you pick a career and then you pursue your career and you become the best that you can in that. And then around 30, people start to settle down. And then these days, women are having babies at 35 and up. And I'm sorry, but again, we get back to that theme of anti-science. It's really crazy to me. I have a lot of people in my life, women, that will just be talking casually and they say, oh yeah, well, I have one child and I have 3 on ice. And I'm like, what does that mean? So I had to start Googling it. That's a common term now because it's so anti-science to be doing the family process and the baby process so late in life that women will actually be talking about how they have babies on ice. And not only that, they talk about how they're so confused and it's become like this meme where women, I follow a lot of pregnancy pages. I don't know. I'm a woman, okay? So I follow a lot of pregnancy pages and baby pages, and I will see these women unironically, I kid you not, talking about how it was so much easier for them to have a baby and bounce back physically when they were in their 20s. And now they just can't believe that they feel like they've aged so much and oh my gosh, why is it so much harder for me? Well, because for all of human history, nobody was having babies this late in life. And it's not in favor of the basic science to continue to try to do so. So I can't believe we don't pass those principles down to young people. But for women specifically, it drives me crazy how we are just put on the fast track to a career without any conversations of this happening. So it really depends, I think, on the parents and the family to communicate the unique role that women and men have in society, but they're never going to get it in public school. They're never going to be told by the mainstream media or by pop culture that there is another way of life. They have to either come to it on their own, the way I kind of did, after already being put through the college system. And luckily, here's the next thing. Sorry, I'm ranting on this episode is like very personal, but I will talk to guys and my friends about dating. And when I hear from the men, they talk about like, well, yeah, I mean, how am I supposed to say, yeah, honey, we can get married and you can end your career when you have $100,000 of debt. I have $100,000 of college debt. And there's no way we're going to, as a couple, be able to pay that off, get a home, and have children. And so women are being strapped with this debt and they're going to now be stay-at-home moms after joining a partnership. I'm really lucky because I don't have student debt. And so I feel like I'm entering a relationship as an asset for what I can bring. And I do want to homeschool the kids and I do want to stay home. For me, I think it's really special with this capitalist economy and the freedoms that we do have. I can have passion projects. And so that's what I consider this podcast. I'm not trying to be a boss babe. I'm not trying to be famous or get some Instagram following or anything. I just love this and I would love to homeschool. So I think it's really important for me to be as energetic and active and educated as possible so that I can do that for my family one day. But I think it's really sad that it's become normalized now for women to follow the same career paths as men. And then we wonder why we have to deal with things like government-provided daycare and government-provided coverage for whether like workplaces need to provide daycares in their offices, whatever it may be. We're running into a lot of problems we've never faced before. What do you think about all these new policies from like conservatives that are supposed to be pro-family when in reality it still takes the woman out of the home?
Well, I mean, I do think you're onto something when you're talking about the age of marriage and the age of having children. The prominent idea in America of marriage these days is what is called the capstone idea of marriage. That is, that marriage is itself a capstone for the other achievements that you've done in life, maybe the more important ideas that have been accomplished. And only after you've achieved all of these very important things would people consider getting married. And the old idea was that you kind of grew together. Like, I don't know if there's a good name for it, but we'll call it the struggle idea of marriage.
Oh, I love
That
that.
is, you get married early, and all of the pains and struggles that make up what life is like, and not only in the 20s, but all the way through life. You grow together with a person, and you experience those struggles with one another. And as the idea of the capstone marriage becomes the accepted American idea, all these other things like really seem to follow from it. That is that you need to continue to support people in careers, that marriage is going to be less important, child rearing is going to be less important to both the man and the woman when it's done at the age of 38 as compared to when it's done before you've arrived or before you've even thought of arriving. So I think it's one of the great blessings of my life to say that my wife and I were nobodies, and when we got married, and we were nobodies when we had children, or at least our first several children, and it was great because we knew we weren't missing anything, and we were nevertheless struggling through daily life and working hard to still make ends meet, but like everything was done together, and we didn't really have this independent identity from our jobs or whatever career ambitions that we might have had, and so I think all of these two models, the struggle model and the capstone model, are really what's at stake. And I think that colleges, universities, high schools, most of public education really pushes a capstone idea, and a lot of parents do. And so really it can only be counteracted at the level of families and churches. And it's a very distinctive feature of our marriage culture. And it's probably one that will have to at least have some amendments to it. Once again, in order to recover family life and strengthen the country.
Actually, I think you're spot on with that. I joke with some of my friends that what is it like to be a woman in the conservative movement? It's hearing the guy that you're talking to or dating on television talking about the importance of family and settling down and promoting Western values, but then him behind the scenes telling you that he's not ready to get married. So there's this concept that, and I think women are very responsible for this. It's a culture thing, but men feel this expectation now to be very successful before they get involved in a family. So what is your tactic of communicating to young men and being that mentor? Because I can't go tell them this kind of stuff. What's a good way for us to start changing this? Because right now, from what I hear in the guys in the dating world, they think that women will not even want to see them or marry them, especially if they aren't making at least over $100,000. And that's crazy to me. I didn't realize. And so I tried to sit down with some guys and hear what their perspective was, because I really care about this stuff. And they actually said, oh, I don't think that they'll even take me seriously in the dating field unless I am making $100,000 at least. How can we start to change that and change their perception of having a woman in the home and someone to go home to and someone that keeps the home and all these things actually is an asset and a benefit to the growth of your career and your family and your community?
Well, I mean, it's obviously an uphill battle on that stuff. I mean, what I would say is that you have to emphasize in your personal relations the glories of growing together with someone, and the glories of having children when you have energy to raise them, and energy to prioritize and the time to prioritize them. And it's a message. I don't see it as my role as a professor in college to teach about this directly in class. When I have personal relations with students outside of class, we'll often talk about these kind of things. And I certainly have friends and children with whom I talk about these things. But that's the central aspect, that everything is better when you're young. When it comes to having kids, you're more patient. Your family can be a higher priority, and you have much more energy, and you're willing to learn. You're not set in your ways. And so I don't know, winning this battle or making these arguments one person at a time, I guess, is the best way to go.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is we don't believe in trying to find some government incentive for people to change their mind or some government education program added to our schools. But this really does start with individuals, mentorship, friendship, family, communication at those levels. Let's transition more into talking about the government relation with these things. My favorite perspective on all of this, especially in America, is that the family is the smallest unit of a government. And that is why they are under attack, because in the left's never-ending pursuit to federalize everything in this country and make it centralized, top-down, forced, they have to get rid of that most intimate and private level of governments and structure and stability, and that is the family unit. So what are your biggest concerns? Is it the Black Lives Matter? I mean, their website was literally saying we need to dismantle the nuclear family unit. This is in pop culture, politics, mainstream media, everything. What are your key focuses here in terms of the future of the country, how important families are?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can have a strong country without strong families. And you know, the truth is that people have delayed marriage longer, they've delayed having children longer, they have fewer children, fewer people marry each generation. I mean, there's a decline, and those are all various indicators of it. I am less worried about the sudden assaults on the family than I am the long-term deprioritization of family life among people in the country. And I do think that when you break down families and just put individuals in the face of government, individuals are weaker than when they band together in families, and people who have fewer loyalties and a smaller sense of belonging than they might otherwise have. And so I totally think that the breakdown of the family will lead to some sort of assertion of tyranny. It's what you'd expect, and it's what generally all political thinkers thought would those two things would go together, and I think it does go together. And and the way I think about how the problem manifests itself is that, people have certain natural desires that can point in many different directions. Men might want to be protectors, or they're certainly different from women, but that doesn't mean that they'll naturally be fathers. There has to be social support for the idea that men will be fathers and encouragement. The same thing goes with women. Women can have children, and maybe they even want to have children, but that doesn't mean they'll prioritize it. It has to be why would a person in good health prioritize motherhood over leisure activities or career activities? And what we see, I think, and the increasing threat to family life is just the deprioritizing of it. People consider it good in the abstract, but just not as good as the other things that they're doing. And so it's kind of a slow drip, drip, drip that attacks the family much more than something like a Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's the drip, drip, drip that is reflected in the culture and that poses the greatest threat to family life over time.
Yeah, that's such a good point of the fact that there were already many problems existent with American family structure before Black Lives Matter ever listed it as an issue that they want to abolish on their website. So thank you for bringing that up. And what you were saying actually reminded me of another core topic relating to the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers. It's so interesting to know that our founders really did think, what we have here is so special. Nobody would ever let this go. Nobody would ever let this slip from their fingers. We will remain they honestly believed we would remain a vigilant, like you said, population that would monitor everything, that would, the federal government will never grow to this size. Yeah, the Anti-Federalists were worried about that, of course. But many on the Federalist side thought, no, federal government is only going to handle 4 core things. The rest will be handled by states and by local communities or by individuals and their families. And so the more we give up that power, what it means to take care of others, the more we're handing over control to the federal government, because somebody's got to take care of these people. If we don't take care of our own, then the government will step in and do it. What do you think about this core lesson of selfishness especially in young Americans, where they're vain, they want those social media likes, they want that quick dopamine or serotonin, whatever the hormone is that you get from those likes. They want these things that serve them, and we've completely abandoned the concept of serving others. And that makes me really nervous, because when we don't take care of those people closest to us, they slip from our grasp and they are taken care of by the community. And let's just say the community these days is not the best.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think you've described the situation well. I mean, that's just another way of putting the issue of prioritizing. That the fact that some of these things are natural, that the differences between men and women are natural, or desire for men maybe to be providers is something like natural, and maybe the desire for women to be mothers is something like natural, doesn't mean they're going to be prioritized. And so, all of the distractions that you talk about, other things that really can consume our time and consume our identity and be priorities for people, like they can crowd out family life. And that's what I mean by the drip, 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 the slow choking of it. I think of as the bigger long-term threat. I mean, the countries of East Asia, let's say Korea in particular, Korea has a birth rate that's about half of our birth rate, and our birth rate is well below replacement. It's said by demographers that Korea is going to shrink about by half every generation for the next century, until the last people left are going to turn out the lights. And that doesn't mean that family life isn't natural. It just means that it's totally not prioritized. And the relations between men and women that are some of the grist for the mill when it comes to family life are not prioritized. And it's possible for countries to have that, apparently, but no one would have thought that 50 years ago. But it's true. These are long-term drip, drip, drip threats to the stability, health of political communities and the happiness of individuals. And so insofar as something like East Asia is a painting that of what the future could be, that's something really to worry about, because it is, nature hasn't changed, but the culture has so significantly changed as to deprioritize these things in people's lives.
Okay. And speaking about culture, because I think that's a common theme here, right? We don't believe in government solutions or top-down approaches. If we really want to affect the culture, what are some of the key areas where you think we can fix? I think definitely having more mentorship of young men and young women, talking to them about their important roles in society and how that it's okay to be unique and different from each other. What are some other problems that you see that could be fixed, and how can we do that? I mean, I know you have 3 books that are full of really great stuff, so maybe we could talk about that after this, but what are some of your key focuses moving forward, and what can we help out with?
Yeah, well, I think finding ways publicly, maybe churches, certainly churches, and maybe in other local ways, to celebrate big families. And this has happened in many other countries where they celebrate big families. This doesn't mean that you have to reward them with more tax breaks or something like that, but honor is what moves human beings. So being parts of institutions that honor the things that contribute to great family life. And I think the capstone of that is something like the large family. And so finding churches that will celebrate that, but also will teach, kind of unapologetically about the importance of the different roles that men and women play in married life and in churches, not just in churches, but also in married life. And the kind of giving out of honors and rewards in that context too. So obviously many of these things are done at very small levels. There are many very strong Catholic churches and many strong Protestant churches that celebrate large families and have a kind of ethic of that. And one of the long-term hopes is those families will take child rearing seriously and beget more such families.
I love that.
That means that they have to take it very seriously. They have to protect the ethos of family life from the corrosive forces in the modern world that would wear it away.
I love that. Have you ever heard of Ballerina Farm?
No, I've heard of ballerinas and farms, but never ballerina farm.
Oh, well, they just do such a good job. They're not a political page or anything, but they promote the greatest culture. And it's a family of 6 kids, and the wife, Hannah, is a former Juilliard ballerina, and her husband is now a farmer. They bought a ranch randomly out in Utah, and now all 6 of the kids, they have 3 boys, 3 girls. The boys, I think, are like 7 years old to maybe 9, and they are all riding horses, helping with the cattle already. And then the girls are in with Hannah, baking and doing all these things, and they ship meat boxes across the country. But they show the behind the scenes of what that home looks like and what their daily tasks are. She shows herself milking the cow every night with the girls. And it's one of those things where you don't need some mandated regulation or government action or child tax credit to incentivize people to want to achieve that. Instead, you can inspire people to want a life like that and to want to live a lifestyle as wholesome as that. So I see that, and I get so hopeful, and I hope that we can embody that kind of energy and spread that around. And that really just does come from communication at the community, family, and individual level. What do we say, though, for the people that maybe aren't lucky enough to have been raised in a religious family? Maybe they don't have many people around them. Do you have any resources or any advice for those people that they're like me, or they're like a lot of the young people out there that weren't raised up with these values, and now they're coming to them and they're confused and they're lost and they want to help out, but they just don't know what to do next?
Well, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what to say there. The thing I think then to appeal to would be human happiness and human virtue. And so you'd want to just show that, or argue with people, tell them, sermonize that their greatest shot for happiness is to connect their destiny with another responsible person and to stick it out. And that alone, that it's very difficult to manage life's waves and curves. But when you're together with someone and you decide to stick it out with that person, you can really manage all these curves better. And so I think that the process of growing with another person gives rise to many virtues. And the end product of that is a certain sort of happiness. It's a kind that it's difficult to give an account of to people who haven't experienced it, which is why these, family breakdown usually is intergenerational. It happens one after the other, and it's very difficult to stop those cycles of intergenerational family breakdown. But I think you can either appeal to faith, happiness, or virtue, and those are goods that can inform people's lives and certainly inform family life.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think another part of that too is showing them that they can serve others and that they'll feel better by doing that, and having a partner and having somebody that they can assist in life. Service, I think, provides people a lot of purpose. Professor, thank you for joining us. I want to give you an opportunity to just talk about any books that are coming up. Do you have any new ones that we should be aware of on top of the 3, or how can we get your other books? And do you have any other links that you want us to know about so we can stay connected with you?
Well, my last book was called The Recovery of Family Life. It was published in 2020, and that is available now in paperback from Baylor University Press. It was the fruit of about a decade of reflection on these matters. And I do plan on writing another book in the next year or two. But I never get to choose the name, and I don't get to choose the publisher, so you'll have to wait and have me on again to promote that.
Okay. We for sure will. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it, and I've been excited to talk with you, so thank you.
Thank you.